So after nearly a month since my last video, sorry about that, I'm back with another one talking about every MCU Disney Plus TV show. The reason I specify MCU and Disney Plus is because there are technically other MCU shows, such as Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Daredevil, even though that's technically a Disney Plus show now. But I've separated them because we're not entirely sure if they're completely canon. So we're strictly going to be talking about the shows that have been released since the Disney Plus streaming service first started back in 2020, with the first show being WandaVision, up until now where She-Hulk has just finished streaming. I'd like to hear what your ranking is down below because I'm sure it's going to be very different to mine. But without further ado, let's get into it. In last place is actually She-Hulk, the latest release, and I know there's a lot of controversy about this show with how many are viewing it negatively, and while at the end of the day I do feel like some of their views are very unfair, I still didn't enjoy this show that much. In fact, I didn't really enjoy it at all. It's very clear that the cast is having a lot of fun making it, which I can appreciate, especially with Tatiana Maslany, who's actually very good in the lead and very charismatic, but the writing, whether that be the script or just the general plot from episode to episode, were very under par for the MCU standard. This obviously falls more into a comedic genre, and I don't think the comedy actually lands at all, with very few jokes getting a chuckle out of me. That combining with the quirkier tone and just the fourth wall breaks made for quite an unsatisfying experience. But it's not all bad. There are certainly bright sparks in there. For example, I liked how they portrayed people preferring She-Hulk than Jen, and how Jen really struggled with having to accept that, and I thought that was probably one of the better things about it, as well as the return of Charlie Cox as Daredevil. I know many are disappointed with his more comedic role in this show compared to his own show. As long as it's not like that in Daredevil Born Again, I'm fine with it because it made perfect sense for this show and it wasn't too far over the top. A problem about this show, which has been talked about ever since the trailers dropped, was its CGI, and while that was very distracting in the first few episodes, as the show slowly progressed, I didn't actually notice it, and then when I did concentrate on it, I felt like they improved it a lot. This show really missed the mark for me, and it felt like a bit of homework to try and complete it. And to be honest, the only other reason that I was stuck watching this show was because I wanted to stay up to date with the MCU and I wanted to see Daredevil again. Other than that, I really had to push through to get through this show. There were certainly fun moments, but not good quality, as I certainly did enjoy the finale, as I found it was very unique and quite surprising, but I wouldn't say that it was good quality like some of the other stuff that MCU has released. Ms. Marvel was the latest release besides She-Hulk, which I never actually covered due to being a busy period. I'll be honest, coming into this show I had very low expectations, and while overall this is still pretty low down within the MCU's quality, I was surprised at some parts. I actually felt it started very strong, and in fact the best part of the entire season, where it just explored Kamala Khan with her battle with life, school, and just exploring her family and culture. I felt that was very well done. Just where it lost me is when it actually tried to focus on the superhero side of things, which is a really odd thing to say in a superhero show. Just that combined with the villains, I thought let this show down a lot. One thing which I couldn't ignore as well was the writing at some points, especially in the mid section of the season, and also just the special effects were painful at times, even worse than She-Hulk's. As I mentioned, it started very strong with Iman Vellani being very charismatic in the lead and probably the best part of this entire show. Just like in She-Hulk, you can tell the cast is having a lot of fun with it, which I can appreciate, but at the end of the day it's quite low down on this list because the writing and script was pretty poor in the end. It starts pretty strong and then kind of fades out as time goes along, and I do understand that this is more of a show designed for a younger audience, so I'm taking that into account, but for me, my personal experiences of it, I didn't enjoy Ms. Marvel that much, but there were some very strong moments which I thought if they kind of dove into a little more than some of the other aspects, it could have been higher up on this list. Since its release, I found What If quite hard to rank and rate, because it is an anthology series in the sense that every episode is a different story unrelated to the other one, except for ultimately the final episode, and with that comes some very strong episodes which I did enjoy a lot, especially the Doctor Strange episode, the Ultron episode, and one which I enjoyed more than others is the zombie episode. But then you also get weaker episodes like the Thor one. I didn't enjoy the first episode that much. So it was a very mixed bag of good, bad, and just straight up okay. The whole point of this show is to open up the multiverse, open up infinite ideas for episodes or for alternative realities for events to play out, and in some cases I just felt like they chose really weird options, ones which weren't really that intriguing to the audience. And I mentioned that Thor episode, it just seems like, you know, why would you include that? But besides those episodes, you get what this show promises, whilst maybe not perfecting them to the point they could do, demonstrate a solid understanding of what this show is meant to be about. The animation is quite unique. It's not made to look completely realistic. It's kind of imitating a comic book in the sense of the character design, and I like that style and I'm glad that they chose it. But like the previous two entries on this list, whilst not being as poor in some areas, it has some very bright moments, but also some very poor choices as well.
Whole squad ready. We came here to see Jet. What you got? No, not on my watch. No way.
Being the third MCU show to be released on Disney Plus, I was blown away with the action sequences on here and how they really lived up to that in the cinema. But besides those, like the other ones, there are some big problems here, maybe not on the scale and as consistent as the other lower down on this list, but nonetheless there are still problems which prevent this from being up there on the list. I appreciate that the Falcon and the Winter Soldier attempts to tackle some very serious issues, whether that be political, racial, and even personal for the characters. How it stumbles its way all the way through to the finale with some of these. It handles the racial side of things very well, with Isaiah Bradley's story being well portrayed and quite an interesting side plot there. But then you have other things such as the main villains, the Flag Smashers, whose plot is quite unclear and they're very contradicting of themselves, and the whole messaging felt wrong. That and the fact that this show had no sense of urgency despite only being 6 episodes long is what let it down, because it felt like by the time it got to the finale, after taking its time, they had to rush everything and it didn't completely deliver a satisfying ending. Despite getting a lot of hate online at the time of its release, I thought Wyatt Russell did a fantastic job as John Walker and I really liked his plot. It just felt weird that at the end of the day it didn't really mean much in the end. Overall, the show was tonally inconsistent and didn't provide a positive coverage on all the issues that it intended, making it quite an inconsistent journey in the end.
Every day I wake up, then I start to break up. Lonely is a man without love.
I can admit that this is probably my most controversial opinion on this list because I know many love this show, and for me, I found it alright. Similarly to Miss Marvel, this show starts off very strong with this split personality storyline being very compelling, and I love the mysteriousness behind it. It holds back from giving answers and takes a slow approach, which I found just kind of made me more engaged in the story. The issue is, after these 2 episodes, when they start to build towards the climax of the series, the tension slowly goes away as you get more answers, which I think they could have held back a bit more. Oscar Isaac stands out in this show as playing both personalities very well, both really different characters, but I think he nailed both of them. Ethan Hawke's character was very fascinating and I thought he also played the character well, but at the end of the day, his character just felt like a very cliche cult leader and didn't really stand out in the end. I love the exploration of Egyptian mythology with the gods and goddesses, just portraying the Egyptian culture very nicely. They'd also go as far as showing these gods on screen and the avatars, but to be honest, I got taken out of it quite a lot with some not so good special effects. Moon Knight works well not having that many ties to the MCU, although its weakest parts are it feeling too much like the MCU. It embraced the weirdness of this character and thrived when doing so, but then at times it kind of fell back into the formulaic Marvel template, which has become quite infamous.
It's the most wonderful time of the year.
As far as MCU superheroes go, Clint Barton is perhaps the most grounded, so the decision to make a TV show rather than a movie for him kind of fits it very well as it's more street level. It was very refreshing despite this being quite a simple, grounded story, but I thought it was executed very consistently, especially compared to the other shows. I never really had any problems with this show, but then again, I never really had moments which I thought were breathtaking. It knows what sort of show it is and it just fits it extremely well. I like the addition of Clint having some hearing issues, and they implemented some sign language into that, which provided great coverage for that, but also just some good point of view shots as well. Hawkeye plays out a bit like a superhero TV show version of Die Hard, and it is a lot of fun, especially combining Haley Steinfeld's Kate Bishop into the mix, made for a very enjoyable watch. WandaVision kicked off MCU streaming life in fantastic fashion with such a unique show, and it was executed for the most part in a solid way. On a personal level, here where I live, this came out during lockdown and was the first MCU content since Spider-Man Far From Home, so believe me, I was heavily invested in it, especially with a lot of the cliffhangers week by week. It takes a few episodes to kind of establish the ever-changing tone with just snippets of something off, so that mystery kind of built as the episodes went on, and that mystery was quite an engaging part of the entire show. As this is such a unique show with ever-changing time periods and tones, I thought Paul Bettany, Catherine Hahn, and obviously Elizabeth Olsen had quite phenomenal, versatile performances, being equally good in all episodes. As stylish as this show is, I think it did disappoint in the end with some of the reveals and just the finale feeling quite mediocre. The execution didn't feel as quite gargantuan as it seemed to set up, and I know, me included, there was a lot of disappointment with Evan Peters' final reveal. It's funny that one of the shows I was most skeptical about, it turns out to be my favourite of the bunch, because when they announced a Loki TV show, I was like, oh my god, let this character die in peace, you know, because the amount of times he's been brought back to life, and when he was dead for good, it felt weird that they kept going on with him. But this actually turns out to be a bigger deal than I initially expected for the whole MCU, as it introduces the multiverse and dives deeper into themes which are very fundamental for the entire universe. As this show focuses on this alternative version of Loki, the one who never had his character arc in Thor Ragnarok, it's very fascinating to see him go on that process again and have him back to being quite evil at the start. It made him quite unpredictable, as you weren't sure if he was finally changing again or if he was going to remain in his current state. Tom Hiddleston continues to prove why he's perfect for the role, and some very strong side performances from Sophia DiMartino and obviously Owen Wilson that had really fun chemistry with Hiddleston. This show opens up so many interesting avenues for the MCU to pursue, which I'm sure it will be doing, especially in Loki Season 2, which I can't wait for. Still stands out as the best of the bunch for me, and I'm sure many would agree with me. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you did enjoy, and don't forget to like and subscribe and leave that comment down below of what your ranking is. I mentioned it in the start, but once again I apologize for taking a month for my next video to come out. It's a combination of having a very busy lifestyle now that I'm studying and at work, also combining with there wasn't that much content that came out last month. I wanted to cover the Hellraiser films, but it's always difficult with films that come out on streaming services as they don't give their release date until a couple months before it's released. So I thought I had planned it out well for when I was going to watch the Hellraiser films, but then out of nowhere it was only about like 2 months until it was released and I couldn't fit it in. So maybe in the future, if they ever make another one, I'll make sure to get that done, because I haven't seen any of the Hellraiser films, but I'm certainly interested in them. But yeah, thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you in my next video, which should be out in a few days, not another month.